Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today. It's Coram and Justin Nielsen here with a breakdown of the action in today's session, where we saw strong gains across the board ahead of some key news items later in the week, Justin.
Yeah, so we'll definitely get into that and a few stocks. Let's take a look at Comstock Resources, BJ's Wholesale, and Tenaris.
Yeah, we'll get to those charts, but first, a look at the major indexes today. Like I said, strong gains. We had the S&P up 1%. Even stronger than that was the Dow, up 1.3% today. The Nasdaq up 0.9%, and the Russell 2000 up 0.7% today. So we did have the S&P 500 getting back above the 50-day line today. Justin, how are you feeling about that?
Yeah, that's great, but I want more. I'm greedy. I want more. Yeah, so I mean, it's good that it got up to that level, but really the level that I'm watching is kind of where it was just a few days ago, right up there, because that's the level that it hit resistance last. That was also where it got support back in September, on September 6th. And this was an area of resistance all the way back in June, July, when we, kind of started a rally, you know, went sideways for a little bit and then really powered higher. But it wasn't until we passed that level that it really kind of took on some extra gains. So that's the level that I'm looking at right here. I think it's great that we got above the 50-day line. That's a start. It's also a level like right around 3,800. That was an area of resistance earlier in October. But again, I'm really looking at that higher level. I'm not going to get too excited until I see us get above that.
Well, then there's a conundrum, Justin, because if you're just adding index exposure, we're going to be further above the 50-day line. Say we do get some positive market reactions this week to the midterms, to the CPI report. If we start advancing here at a quick clip, then you're getting further away from moving averages that we like to use to manage our risk.
This is true. This is true. And if you're only investing in indexes, that might be an issue. But we're kind of doing a combination, right? You're looking at the indexes, but you're also looking at the individual stocks. And right now, unless you're looking at energy, there's not as much to view there inside the individual stock areas. There's still a lot of damage out there. A lot of stocks, aren't doing great. And while the S&P 500 had a strong move today, uh, both the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq Composite are still being driven by some of the big heavyweights, the big mega caps, and they had a good day, so some of that did trickle into the indexes. Whereas, I mean, if you look under the surface, yes, the advancers were greater than the decliners, but not by a huge amount. I mean, I'm looking at for the New York Stock Exchange, it was about 2 to 1, which is good, but it's not like 3 to 1, 4 to 1, like superpower, where it's just a very strong showing by the advancers. Over on the Nasdaq, I mean, it was a lot less. I mean, you had like 2,500 advancers to 2,000 decliners. So I mean, yes, it was marginally better. And that's been one of the issues here. I think that we still have a lot of damage out there. We still have this overhang of the Fed and hiking rates. There was the thinking that maybe a pivot was happening. Jerome Powell kind of crushed those views last week, and I think there's
Crushed
going to
our
be a lot of waiting.
dreams.
Yeah,
No,
crush
just
the
kidding.
dreams, right? Exactly. Well, and it was one of those things where he just wanted to make sure that a lot of what the Fed does isn't just about those policy moves. It's also about what they kind of project.
Yep.
And he had to project that no, we're not going to back down that quickly. We're being tough, and that's something that he had to do to kind of make sure that the focus was still on inflation and that coming down, and more needs to be done in the data.
Yeah.
Show up in the data before they take their foot off the brake there.
Well, more data coming this week with the Wednesday CPI report, so
Exactly.
we'll have to see it. And I guess it's the other thing. Say you were using the S&P getting above the 50-day line as your signal to add index exposure. Well, you're coming up on more news events. I feel like
Yeah.
that's kind of been the issue with
Right.
getting too aggressive. Either way, is
Hmm.
that could all change in a couple of days, but we'll be ready for any scenario. We also want to take a quick look at the dollar. Here's UUP coming off, so that also helping fuel today's gains. And then from a sector perspective, let's take a look at some ETFs. So XLE Energy, which you mentioned, continuing to move higher, adding another 1.75% gain today. And then let's also look at XLC. So in the communication services sector, this is Meta, right?
Yeah, so
Driving the
XLC, you have
gains.
to look at Meta Platforms. I mean, that had a 6.5% rise. But look, that chart is not something that's going to excite
Yeah.
any of our readers, long-term readers that follow our strategies. That this is still really a dumpster fire. And
Yeah.
Google Alphabet is also in the XLC, and that was up a good deal. So again, one of the things that was driving the indexes were some of these mega caps that were up a lot, but these charts look horrible.
Right.
So there's not much you can do there.
Exactly. XLK tracking the technology sector, also, waiting
This is
for these.
Microsoft right there.
Yeah. Microsoft and IGV too.
Which Microsoft
Also
also
has
has a very,
Microsoft there.
yeah, Microsoft has a very big showing there. So again, a lot of this stuff that's tech. During our IBD Live session, we went over the industry groups, and look, last week, even though we ended on a good note, up over 1% in the markets, we were down 5%. It wasn't a good week at all
Right.
especially after that Fed meeting and
Mhm.
press conference. So there's still a lot of work here to be done, and a lot of the industry groups that are still suffering the most are those that are tech related. We went through, and computer software was leading the downside, and whether it's education, financial, medical,
Yeah.
anything that said computer software, I mean, that was down considerably. So tech is still really under pressure.
Yeah. Not squarely in our sights right now. And as we mentioned, so some news events coming up in addition to the CPI report later this week. Even sooner, we have the midterm elections happening tomorrow. And that is something that might have the potential to move markets because anytime you have any sort of level of uncertainty, then when that uncertainty is off the table, market may have a sigh of relief, but also the market favors Washington gridlock. That is something that the historical data points to.
Yeah, absolutely. David Ryan did a really good presentation last week on IBD Live, kind of showing some data. We got some data from our Dow Jones counterparts. They provided some market data that was really interesting. That I was looking at today. That basically the last time the S&P 500 or the market wasn't higher 6 months after the midterm elections was back in 1947 when FDR was president, and the last time it wasn't higher a year later after midterm elections was back in 1939, again when FDR was president.
Yeah, and the norm can always be broken. We can always have
Sure.
outliers and things
Yeah.
things like that. So we're not making any big bets here at the moment. But that's why not only do we look at historical data, but also combine that with what we're seeing in real time, right? And that's why it's important to not only have index levels that we're looking at, but continually looking for those next setups as well.
Absolutely. And that's why having a watch list and doing that work ahead of time is so important. Even when the market isn't that great, you want to be looking at those stocks that are setting up and specifically that have that relative strength component, because it's that relative strength, the stocks that are holding up the best, those tend to be your future leaders when the market does turn. So you want to be ready for that.
Yeah. Well, to help us get ready for that, let's take a look at a couple of stocks looking interesting right now. Here's CRK Comstock Resources with a gain of 10% today. Strong volume behind the move. Had earnings last week with some really strong triple-digit growth. And the weekly chart looking interesting here as well, Justin. And it's in the right area. It's in the right sector.
Right, exactly. So natural gas has certainly been one of those areas that is, still getting the love. And it's funny because, I mean, you look at UNG, and it's kind of surprising what some of these stocks are doing, the way that they look. But you can't deny the technical action that's happening in this area. And CRK is just another example of something that has a lot of strength. I would look at this as, potentially actionable,
Right.
even today. We were looking at it earlier on IBD Live, but as it kind of cleared this level, just below 20, that seemed like an area of resistance that was important, and it cleared it with gusto.
Yeah, that it did. So for those who missed it today, ideally we see it tighten up from here. Justin, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm looking at for a lot of these energy stocks. A lot of them are extended. This one wasn't extended, I
Right.
didn't think, but a lot of them are extended. So you kind of would like to see some tighter action, some drifting down a little bit, or just holding right here would
Mm-hmm.
be good. But that's not always what happens, right? A lot of times
We'll
these
see what happens.
strongest stocks will just keep on going up without you, but a lot of times they do give you other opportunities. You just have to keep them on your
Mm-hmm.
radar.
Yes. And next on our list, let's take a look at ticker BJ. BJ's wholesale and the discount and variety group reversing higher today, up 2% as it works on a little bit of a pullback, a little bit of a handle here after clearing an early entry. And it's approaching this round number at 80.
Yeah, and what I like about it is it kind of came up close to that level, and then it did that sideways action, right? And look at what happened with the volume. It's really kind of drifted off. Now, granted, I would have liked to see more volume on that right side of the cup here. It kind of drifted off when I would have liked to see that act a little bit stronger. But go ahead and hover over the pattern recognition, because something that's interesting about the depth of this cup is that it's really 13%. That actually qualifies as a flat base. This just hasn't done much. And
Mm-hmm.
I usually think of flat bases as something where it's okay for the volume to dry up in the flat base, because I think of it as institutions taking a wait and see approach. And so a lot of times it's not that they
Mm-hmm.
want to do any selling, but they don't want to do any buying either. And so that can kind of lead to this back and forth action. I look at this as a base on base. This is kind of a nice tight consolidation after that wider base that we had, that double bottom, and that's positive action. Not only that, but you
Mm-hmm.
got that blue dot that you're showing on the screen, and what that means is the relative strength line, how that stock has performed versus the S&P 500, is at the highest level that it's been at in 52 weeks. And it's a stock that's in a base. And so we really like to see those blue dots. We screen for them because it's a great way to find potential leaders.
Yes, that it is. And we are seeing a handle being
Mhm.
identified by pattern recognition on this weekly chart now. So that is good to see. Okay, last on our list, let's take a look at TS Tenaris. Steel stocks charging ahead. We really saw an improvement in their rankings in the weekly industry analysis that you did today, Justin, on IBD Live. So talk to us about what we're seeing here.
Well, and one of the things I've always been interested about with Tenaris, and this goes back almost 20 years now, that sometimes Tenaris can have the benefit of both worlds, where you get the steel, the steel aspect of it. It is a steel producer, but when you look at that description, where its steel is going to is really for services and products for the energy and industrial applications, specifically pipelines. So that's something where when you're providing infrastructure for energy, and energy is doing well, guess what? You're probably going to be getting a little bit of a benefit from that as well. So Tenaris
Mm-hmm.
has that going for it. And while this most recent base has a deeper depth, 36% was the depth on this big cup. It's come up to the top of that range. So here again, what I'd like to see is maybe a little bit of pause here. It did kind of pause right before it went up above 30. So now that it's getting up to 35, maybe another little pause here. And then if it could power higher, this might be one that can go further.
Mm-hmm. Great point there, Justin. Thank you so much for putting these stocks on our radar. And thanks everyone for tuning in. The team will be back with you tomorrow morning on IBD Live, and we hope you join us for the latest stock market news and analysis there, investors.com/IBD Live, for all of the details, where we are talking about our take on overall market conditions, how you should be managing your portfolio exposure given the current market environment, stocks that we're watching, and so much more. So we'll see you there in the morning, investors.com/IBD Live. And we'll also see you right back here tomorrow at the close. Till then, signing off.